Robert Craddock. Hello to you, Crash.
G'day, Gerard. Yeah, a very sad day. There was only one Patrick Smith, wasn't he? He was brilliant, witty. He could slice you and dice you in one paragraph. A very brilliant man.
What were your dealings with him through the years, Crash?
I always admired him, and we didn't. We used to cross over of all places the Melbourne Cup, but I remember talking to Lee Matthews once, and I thought it was a terrific rapper when he won his 3 premierships in a row. Where I sat next to him at lunch, I said, "Which journalist do you admire the most of the Melbourne, the whole, all the columnists and everything?" He said, "Oh, Patrick Smith's very good." He said, "Right on the money," and just he said, "I don't always agree with him," he said, "but always worth a read." And I thought that's high praise. But he was very clever. I remember once Bryson DeChambeau, the American golfer who's got a million theories on life, came out and did a press conference and sprouted all these theories. And I forget what Smithy's lead was, but it was something like, when Albert Einstein went to bed, he dreamed of being Bryson DeChambeau. Just completely pulled him to the shreds. And on the putting green the next day, all the golfers were talking about it. They said, "You must read this guy Smith from the Australian."
He had a lovely way about him from that point of view. And he had the cross-section of sports, which was terrific. I used to come across him as a Cub reporter. We'd spend time around the Spring Carnival together, and he's obviously a constant through footy season. But he did love his golf, and he could poke fun of it. So I was thinking in more recent times, what he would have had a field day with the Live PGA split, and he would have had a field day with the Peter V'landys ears, one way or the other.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was his sweet spot, wasn't it? Like just saying what everyone else was thinking was a bit scared to write. I always remember he had an obsession about Colonial Stadium, didn't he? And he used to call it Calamity Castle. Remember that? And he wrote column after column on it to the point where I felt he was obsessed. And I saw him at the Melbourne Cup one day and I said, "Smithy, you're in good form, but mate, all these the Calamity Castle columns, they're infatuating Melbourne, but you write for the Australian." And he said, "Nah, it's something I believe has to be said," and he stuck by it. But one of his better columns, I got to say, Gerard, and I'm sorry I never got to the bottom of it, was he came out about 6 weeks before the Sydney Olympics and said, "There is only one person who should be lighting the flame for Australia, and it's Cathy Freeman. She embodies everything we want to be as a nation. I know she's running. I know it's a controversial choice, but she would be my selection." Now, I don't know whether he knew something. I don't know whether he simply just, that was the way he felt it should be, Gerard. But he got it spot on, and either way, whether it's a sign of him being a great newsman or just had a feel for the occasion, he gets 10 out of 10.
It is one of the changes in modern media. We don't have that daily columnist anymore. So this is a phenomenon around the world. And just by happenstance, I was listening to a podcast yesterday that was speaking of this as the crusty sports columnist in your town or in your paper or from a national perspective was such a figure over so many generations, and that shifted in recent times. That's not really there anymore.
Yeah, it's a great point you make, and you know what it comes from? It comes from the fact that everything is digitalised now, and you know precisely how many people are reading your stories. And as good as a lot of sports columnists are, it's just another opinion. And we've worked out that news beats everything, Gerard. Like if you get a thread of news or something, that often beats the strongest opinion. When digital came in, it was a shock to all of us because we realised that some stories that we thought people were interested in, they aren't. I remember, Gerard, I spent my life writing stories about mystery balls in cricket because I thought the fans loved it. Then I realised it was only me and my dad who were reading them. And he admitted late in life he used to doze off at them. So it was chastening. We had to adjust. And I still think, though, that, in the same way that Andrew Bolt still rates very well for the Herald Sun, there's still that place for the specialised sports columnist. And, Mark Robinson does it so well, doesn't he? And rates very well, too, for the Herald Sun. But you're right. They've been diminished over the years.
Yeah, I must admit, I would rather read one of your columns than the latest news, just that sort of think piece, the provocative. But and the placement of Patrick, so it was the banner back page on the Australian every day. So that is old guard. That's old guard.
What I loved about it was simply this: when before the Murdoch resources were combined in Melbourne, the Australian and the Herald Sun were actually opponents. And I know the Australian felt that even though the Herald Sun, who I sort of worked for, was stocked with a lot of AFL writers, like, say, 7 compared to just 2 on the Australian, if they had Patrick Smith in good form, that's all they needed to get people to pick up the Australian.
Yeah.
You know, because he had this devoted band of readers who just wanted to see what Smithy was angry about today. And, he had his crusades, as you know, whips in horse racing.
Yep.
He was, and that came right from the heart. He never liked it, and he crusaded against it, and he wouldn't give a square centimetre in the argument. And that was, as you say, I have eternal affection for that style of columnist who just, I am what I am, I'm putting it out there, and if you don't like me, I don't particularly care.
Yes, yeah. What did you know about his career with Paran? So fearsome fast bowler, and he was that cliche in every way. He was an angry cricketer.
Oh yeah, I know. I always remember. Who was it? He stitched up someone for being unduly hot-headed and provocative. Yes. And they went back through the disciplinary records of Victorian grade cricket and found where he'd been disciplined for completely going off reservation, like going off tap and a thing. And I must say, it was a great comeback, you know. And I think he sort of laughed along with it, as you know, he was probably hoping it never came out. But he had hot-blooded moments, a real fast bowler with that mentality, that sort of Jeff Thompson, very much a man of the 70s in terms of, you know, getting a bit angry and not afraid to show it. So that was him as a fast bowler and him as a columnist. But like the best columnist, I have to say, and Ron Reid was one of these, Melbourne's own, they had worked in the industry from the bottom up almost, and they'd been sports editor, they'd sort of been copy boys and everything in between. So they had a lovely affection for the printed word. And I loved him on radio too, didn't you? And one thing that I did enjoy, when Kevin Bartlett would ask him a question, sometimes there'd be silence and he'd answer it in one word, and he'd go sort of, yeah, maybe. And it was just good radio, wasn't it? You know.
Yep, there's a lot of affection for the sparring that used to go on at 9 o'clock on Mondays today. So thank you for all who have sent through those messages. 0433 98 11 16, 40 Winks Temper Text, Temper, a mattress like no other. The group stage of the World Cup crash is at its close. India unbeaten, Australia drawn to play South Africa, New Zealand the other to qualify. What are we to make of the past 6 weeks of cricket?
Yeah, it's well, India's just dominated everything, but I still wouldn't be shocked if New Zealand beat them in the semi-final. They've been almost perfect. And I'm looking for flaws, Gerard, and I can't find many, except the fact they've only got 5 bowlers. And if someone has an off day, if you got into one of them, you might just see the castle fall. But they'll be tough. I think it's been a good tournament. Maxwell's sort of given it the electric crackle that it needed, something that distinguished it from 20 and 50 over cricket, and Test cricket. You know, something that says this brand of cricket is still very, very special. So I think the tournament owes him a huge favour. But Australia is done really well to win 7 in a row. That's no mean effort in the subcontinent. And, you know, I'm just loving their matchup with South Africa and the big hoodoo that South Africa have to crack to beat them.
So just before the here and the now, what was your view of the Maxwell innings last week?
I was, when I heard him speak about it later, I was staggered by the amount of calculation in it, like where he was talking about playing a reverse sweep to get that man down behind square on the offside to give him extra room each side of cover. And move 1 was followed by move 2, which triggered move 3. And to us, it just looked like this madhouse compilation of instinctive hitting. But it was brilliant in its own calculation, and far more calculation went into it than we thought. And I also felt it was a tribute to his hands. Just as he said, he just stayed still, and his hands, at one stage, it looked like he was playing squash or hockey or something like that. And he said he backs himself to adjust his hands to the bounce of the ball. And I think it'll inspire young kids, well, it has already around Australia, to try and produce some of those kooky shots and to challenge the textbook. I mean, Gerard, when you and I were growing up, it was always put your foot to the pitch of the ball, wasn't it? Well, he ignored that for one of the most blissful centuries we've ever seen. And so, but the one thing he did follow from the textbook during all that cramped period was he kept his head still. And that's a big thing. He never sort of lost his shape. His shape might have been as stiff as a pretzel, but he kept still. And it's amazing when you keep still how your eye works quite beautifully for eye players. That's what I took out of it.
And where do you want to rank it in the overall?
I feel it's Australia's best one-day innings. Is it the best from all nations? I'm not sure about that. My number one was Stephen Waugh's in a Super Six game against South Africa in 1999, when he was told by Trevor Hohns that if Australia gets eliminated today, you will lose the captaincy. We're moving on. And Australia was 3 for 50, chasing 270. Oh, it was there. It was an overcast day, at Headingley. It was grim, and Donald and Pollock were bowling, and we weren't going to make 120. And he put together this magnificent century. And I just thought it was different to Maxwell's. Maxwell's was Afghanistan. This was South Africa under heavy clouds in England. And I just got Maxwell's past that one,
Yep.
So, Gerard, I find when you're comparing great innings and great achievements, you often say you pick them apart by saying, what didn't they have? We all know they're great, but were they missing anything? And the only thing about Maxwell's innings that I can possibly poke a hole in was, yes, it was Afghanistan. They're bowling well, but it was Afghanistan. And secondly, it wasn't an elimination game like Waugh's was. Waugh would have been sacked as captain if he'd got out for a duck.
Yes.
He ended up winning the tournament. So that just pushes it up a cog for mine. But it was sublime. It was wonderful.
We will obsess all week around the Australian makeup for a semi-final against South Africa on Thursday night. Crash, what's the number one question to be answered?
It's very simple, but very complex at the same time. Labuschagne or Stoinis? That's the issue. And I think that I'm slightly in favour of Labuschagne because just the theory, we say it every week, but heavy-duty tournaments are won by heavy-duty players. He's got an electric edge in the field to him, which I think would be missed if he wasn't there. And I feel that since 2019, Stoinis' batting has been pretty average, really. But I also get that if it's an absolutely flat deck against South Africa on Thursday night, there would be a temptation to put in Stoinis as the power hitter. But I just think the quality of their attack, I'm comfortable with Labuschagne, but I'm hearing the selectors are still very uncertain about it, Gerard.
The fact that they're not using Stoinis much with the ball is so 19 overs for the tournament. Is he a true all-rounder at that stage, or do you boil this down to the batting?
Yeah, well, he's had his injuries too, and as a batsman, he's been only average. He does have a habit of getting it right on the night, but where I still don't mind the bankable consistency of Labuschagne. He's an incredible story, Labuschagne. Like, I don't rate him as a great one-day player, and he always seems to be batting a gear behind where he probably should be. But when he retires, he can look back, pull out a cigar, and say, you know what, I left nothing on the table. What about he wasn't going to be in this tournament, and then Agar got injured and in he went. And then he substituted for Smith, and then it was Stoinis, and then it was Mitchell Marsh. And it was incredible. And he played every game. And so you could say, he's a creature of fortune, and he is lucky. But he's made his own luck by even, and I've got a story just coming up this morning, Gerard, talking to Jonty Rhodes.
Yeah.
When Jonty, his hero, was in town last year for the South African series, who do you reckon went up and said, mate, can you give me some tips about fielding at mid-off? Sharpening my returns, minimising the chance that a batsman has to get home in a run-out. Now, guess what? A year down the track, that could save his whole World Cup future.
Yeah, and he's had his Superman moment, so he's got his matching image with a run-out.
Yeah, well, it is, and that was the image he had on his wall as a boy of Jonty Rhodes flying mid-air to dismiss Inzamam al-Haq at the Gabba in 1992 World Cup. And it was inspiring. I mean, Jonty inspired a whole generation of players to just let go in the field, have a crack, dive, but, make an art form of it. And he was one of them. And he's always been that way.
What's your main concern with Australia going in?
Just that they struggle to get early wickets. Just even against the modest teams like Bangladesh and that, they seem to just... there's no fright factor with the new ball. And I'm not saying that there generally is in the subcontinent, but it's a dangerous time. Gerard, if Australia win the toss and bat and get away, I just can't see South Africa getting over this historical hoodoo of there's too much baggage there. Like, it's just, if Australia put 250 or on the board or something above that, good luck, South Africa. And I know people say, well, that's not a big score in India. But given they've never won a 20-over World Cup or a 50-over World Cup, I'm dying for Australia to bat first and then just see the pressure cascading down the faces of the South African batsmen when they come in. You know how sport works. It's just so hard to chase when you've got a ball and chain of 30 years of sorrowful history dragging along behind you.
What comes to mind for you in that litany of woe, Crash?
Well, in South Africa, when Australia, they beat South Africa very narrowly in 1999 in the Super Sixes game and then drew with them and went through an extra run rate. I think that what comes to mind is just the pain of South Africa on that day of Hansi Cronje being unable to almost talk at the press conference. The Australians whooping it up in the Headingley dressing room, just being absolutely almost hysterical and loving every bit of it. But then guess what? A couple of years later, they arrived back there or 6 years years later, arrived back there in a test match and had tough times. And they realised how thin the walls of the dressing room are. And they thought, gosh, that would have just killed South Africa to hear us celebrating the way we were. And it was a pain that's never left South African cricket. Some bogeys are put to bed really quickly, but I spoke to my old mate Neil Manthorpe last week, and I did a story on it, and he said to me, "Oh, mate, even when South Africa are winning 7 matches in a row to start the tournament, the players were saying, we know where this is heading, bloody Australia in the bloody semi-final."
Yes.
There was that, the Grim Reaper circulating in the shadows, just loitering and peeping at you from beneath the hood. That's how they felt. So they've got, it's such an interesting game because sport's all about mental matchups, and maybe they crack the curse. Maybe they do, but there's this sense of foreboding about it, I have to say, Gerard. Why am I laughing?
No, that's it. Legacy is so stitched into these things when you get to the semi-finals of a tournament. So what would it mean for Pat Cummins and his leadership of Australia? What do these 2 games mean to him?
Well, huge. And I have to say it, I came on your show, a month ago and said, I'm just not sure he's in Australia's best team. And you could still mount an argument that Stark and Hazelwood are better one-day bowlers. But I tell you what he does do, he gives players a sense of calm assuredness, and which is so important in World Cups. And what I like about him is he lets players be themselves, and he knows what they want. Example A, Glenn Maxwell, he's a bit different. He's not in your same straitjacket on tour as you say you're Labuschagne. That's okay. Travis Head, he's a bit different. He's out there free-stroking sort of guy. We'll get out for nothing a few times in a row, but that's okay, Trav, be yourself. And the third one is Adam Zampa. top wicket taker for the tournament, but he's found this sort of calmness because Cummins just lets him be himself. When everyone else is playing golf, he wants to go to the Himalayas and just chill out and put these beautiful robes on and sip his coffee that he makes.
Yeah.
Fine, Adam, just be yourself. Great, very underrated skill of captaincy, Gerard, letting players feel comfortable in their own skin.
It's so interesting now that we reached this moment. These tournaments are funny. It takes you so long to get here, and then it's all over in 5 days. As you think about India's trajectory and the way they've totally dominated the tournament, now that finds right down Australia and South Africa with so much recent shared heritage of acrimony and controversy. That's with the players in this group, never mind this historical overlays. That I do think the World Cup is still a great tournament. This has been, I think, a terrific format, but gosh, it's turbocharged now.
Oh, it really is. When you think of Australia only lost 2 matches, and they're to the teams they now must beat. They lost to South Africa, lost to India. Now they've got to beat them. I mean, it's good. And we've just seen a Rugby World Cup. And, Gerard, I don't want to keep piling on South Africa. I really don't. But I have to say this. The final little barb in the ribs for them is the fact they recently won the Rugby World Cup, South Africa, with a team who could win from anywhere. They won their last 3 matches by 1 point, the South African Rugby Union team. So they're the magicians. They can see a hat and they can pull out a rabbit, the South African Rugby Union team. So the cricket team are further weighed down by the fact that that's what they're the opposite. They can lose from anywhere in these big moments. But you're right, it has been a good tournament. It's a tournament the code needed, the 50-over game. You know, it's a difficult sell between World Cups, the 50-over game. Yep. It really is. You felt it and I felt it. Players rested, captains not turning up for it. You know, and players who you barely know representing Australia and whatever. It's a difficult sell, but this has been a good format. 10 teams, you play each other once, best 4 make it in. Really simple, and it's worked.
Crash, what's the legacy of Meg Lanning's time as captain of Australia?
Well, it's just that she saw the sport grow so much, and she was the captain of the ship when it went from girls rushing from jobs to play cricket to full-time professionalism, world domination. And you know, there was a time there, a few mates of mine who are very good judges consider her the best captain in Australia, male or female, during her tenure. You know, she was outstanding. In a funny sort of way, Gerard, she kept so much inside of Meg at press conferences. She was deliberately kept her emotions on a very solid sort of flat line. It was lovely in a way to see her just take the cork off the bottle in her she didn't do it by design, but to see her get a bit emotional in the last press conference, it was almost the crossing of the line from one life to the other. Retiring at 31, it's young. I have to say it. There's an air of mystery about it because she did miss the Ashes recently for unspecified reasons. Maybe it was as simple, and I know Pete Lawler said this to you, that she'd fallen out of just love with the passion needed to do it. You know, and you can't manufacture it. When it's gone, you can't be half-baked about it, particularly when you're as professional as she is. So maybe it just happens sometimes. And there's no law that says you have to be 34, 35. She was on the go from being a top-ranked sort of 16-year-old. So I know her international career went for 13 years, but she's been really eyeball deep in the system for about 15, 16 years. And that's... You know, Gerard, one last thing. When you're a young captain, you're robbed of your childhood. Graham Smith said that in South Africa. He was a 22-year-old captain. And he said, look, I was privileged. I enjoyed it. But a part of me was taken away from me. I couldn't be the goofy sort of Smithy, just bumbling my way through sort of from becoming a boy to a man. I had to be a man straight away. And there would have been a bit of that with Meg.
Yeah, just when I read that in your piece, is that was what most resonated. Maybe this is the toll, and you did liken it to how long Alan Border was Australian captain. Maybe this is the toll of long-term captaincy, and particularly when it's cast upon a young person.
Yeah, well, Border always said when he retired, he said, I did it for 10. I swear you, the right length is 5. He said, I hope the next person or anyone in the future doesn't go for longer than 5. He said, because it will turn you inside out. And it just, when he said it, I thought it just made a lot of sense, because you saw guys from Michael Clark slowly lose the plot, and Steve Smith at that point, he got burnt out quite quickly. So, and she did it for 10 years. And you think of the meetings and the plotting and the planning, and there's an extra stress too, Gerard, when everyone else is older than you. When you're 22 and you're giving orders to someone who's 26, that's... But one thing I must say, beautiful batter too to watch. Yeah. Wowee. Her cut shot was a thing of beauty because it had so many subtle layers. You put 1, 2, 3 people in there saying, well, she's not getting through there. And guess what? With this little punch, she found the fence. Like, she was a beautiful player.
Beautiful player, great captain, and all the plaudits are richly deserved.